Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're exploring a completely fascinating, largely suppressed, lost cosmos, the deeply profound spiritual world of the pre-colonial Philippines. Long before Spanish colonization, these islands were home to this vibrant, living universe of supreme creators, nature spirits, and incredibly symbolic magic. So, let's dive right in and uncover how this ancient world actually worked.
Here's a quick roadmap for today. We'll kick things off with the supreme creator Bathala. Then we'll look at the Anitos, who were the divine messengers, followed by the bamboo creation myth. After that, we'll get into the Catalonan and Babaylan leaders, explore the physical Lingling-o amulet, and finally wrap up with the esoteric legacy that survived to this day.
All right, part 1. The supreme creator Bathala, the originator of the universe.
So the ancient Tagalogs revered Bathala as this transcendent supreme god, a being who literally existed in the atmosphere before heaven and earth were even formed. Interestingly, scholars actually trace the word Bathala back to Sanskrit roots, words like Bathara, which means noble lord, or Avatara, meaning the descent of a god. And what's wild is that when Spanish missionaries arrived in the 16th century, they realized they could map Bathala directly onto the Christian god because he was already seen as the singular creator of all things. It definitely made imparting their Catholic doctrines a whole lot easier.
But here is a really fascinating detail. Bathala's true name was considered way too sacred, or maybe even unknown, to actually pronounce out loud. Instead, the ancient Tagalogs used all these different titles to address his specific domains. They'd call him May Kapal, which translates to owner of what has been shaped, basically the creator. They also used May Lupa, owner of the earth, and Muliari, the source of power. Later esoteric traditions even called him Nuno, or the Ancient One. It just shows this immense, deep reverence, right? The creator was understood entirely through his actions, rather than just a single name.
Moving on to part 2. Anitos, the divine messengers and spiritual intermediaries. Because Bathala resided so far away in his distant heaven, he didn't exactly micromanage everyday human affairs. Listen to this observation from a Spanish chronicler named Miguel de la Huarca, recorded way back in 1582. He wrote, "They are the assistants, the ministers of Bathala, who sends them on earth to help men. These crucial, everyday helpers, they were known as the Anitos." So the absolute key takeaway here is the clear split in this cosmological hierarchy. Think of it like this. On one side, you have Bathala, the big boss. He's this overarching, distant power up in his heavenly realm of Kalualahathian, and you definitely wouldn't dare bother him directly. But on the flip side, you have the Anitos. These were accessible earthly presences, often the spirits of dead ancestors or nature spirits. If you needed a good harvest, safe travel on a scary sea voyage, or healing from some disease, you went to the Anitos. You'd leave an offering for the specific spirit in charge of that exact domain. Okay, part 3, the bamboo creation myth, the origins of humanity. Picture this. According to ancient Tagalog belief, the world started with literally just the sea and the sky, no land at all. A primordial bird, a kite, grew totally exhausted from flying with nowhere to land, so it stirred up the sea to clash with the sky. To calm things down and restrain the raging waters, the sky showered down islands. Later on, that same kite was pecking angrily at a piece of floating bamboo until, snap, it split in two. Out of one joint came the first man, and out of the other, the first woman. It's just a beautifully metaphorical origin story tying humanity directly to the local environment and the clash of the elements. Which brings us to part 4, Catalonan and Babaylan leaders, mediators of the spiritual realm. Zooming in a bit further to the human realm, we find the folks who actually navigated this complex spiritual hierarchy. The catalonan among the Tagalogs and the Babaylan down in the Visayas were the esteemed ritual specialists for their communities. And what's absolutely amazing here is that these incredibly powerful figures were almost always women or individuals of a third gender. They held immense social and spiritual authority, acting as the literal bridge between regular human society and the unseen world of the Anitos and Bathala. In fact, there's a 1604 account from Jesuit Pedro Chirino that perfectly captures their elite status, noting that female priestesses were completely central to ritual life. In places like pre-Hispanic Batangas, they were the absolute custodians of oral tradition. Whether the community was facing a sudden illness, a terrible harvest, complicated childbirths, or major rites of passage, it was the catalonan who stepped up to lead the chants and sacrifices to restore balance. It really reflected a worldview where feminine spiritual authority wasn't just respected, it was absolutely paramount to survival.
Let's look at part 5, the Lingling-o amulet, a tangible symbol of spiritual power.
Let's anchor these high-level concepts to something physical. This is the Lingling-o, a pre-colonial symbol of fertility and virility from the northern Luzon region. The design perfectly balances contrasting energies. The outer shape represents the uterus, which symbolizes feminine energy. But look at the negative space created within that shape. It represents the phallus, or masculine energy. By unifying these two reproductive organs into one single cohesive shape, the amulet was believed to hold immense spiritual power. It represented the ultimate harmony required to create life.
And, this wasn't just some passive piece of jewelry you'd wear for looks. High priestesses, the Babayans, actively used the Lingling-o in their rituals. It was deeply, deeply practical. Ethnic groups like the Ifugao and Kalinga relied on this symbol to bless couples struggling to have children, to ensure farmers got flourishing crops, and to grant fishermen abundant catches. It was quite literally a physical manifestation of the divine balance they were constantly seeking from the Anitos.
Finally, part 6, the esoteric legacy, the survival of indigenous beliefs.
So, you might be wondering, how on earth did all these rich, complex beliefs survive the brutal Spanish colonization and the introduction of Catholicism? Well, through a brilliant process of syncretism, specifically within the esoteric tradition of Anting-Anting. The ancient Tagalogs essentially mapped their lost cosmos right onto Catholic terminology to keep it alive. Bathala, he became the Infinito Dios, the highest god linked to amulet magic. They kept a female divine aspect too, calling her Infinita Dios, or Maria. The Santísima Trinidad were viewed as emanations that were granted authority to create the world. They even took the 5 vowels, the cinco vocales, and turned them into the secret names of the fragmented supreme deity. And remember the Anitos? They were cleverly mapped onto the 24 ancianos, holy spirits assigned to guard the hours and heavenly bodies. It is honestly a breathtaking system of cultural survival.
And hey, these aren't just dusty historical facts. Modern observances continue to celebrate this heritage today, which shows just incredible resilience. Down in Cavite, the Sanghyang ritual is still performed for healing and bountiful harvests, heavily layering Christian elements over those ancient pagan rites. Similarly, the Babayalan festival in the city of Bago yearly honors the folks who still serve their communities as modern-day folk therapists and wisdom keepers. So we've journeyed from the distant, supreme Bathala all the way down to the tangible Lingling-o amulet. Knowing how deeply these indigenous beliefs syncretized and survived centuries of suppression, we have to ask ourselves, how do these ancient, nature-bound, and remarkably gender-fluid spiritual traditions still ripple through and shape modern Philippine culture today? It's a fantastic question, and it really reminds us that the lost cosmos isn't entirely lost. It's just hidden in plain sight. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring.